guys, what's up? I'm Cars. Welcome to Fix Your Shitty Movement. Today we're talking about your feet, kind of, but also hips and glutes. And if you watched my Fix Your Shitty Movement on where I talked about like the corkscrewing of the feet, then you kind of know what I'm talking about. The hips are either the feet or they're bracing, right? They're one or the other, because your hips don't really have a mind of their own. If your foot is stable, your hip can't move around, right? If your pelvis is stable, it can't really move around, right? So movement of the hip happens when you're not braced properly or when you're not rooted properly. So feet and core, always the source of all of your fucking problems. So we've gone over the glute bridge before. And it's actually where I've also touched on like that corkscrewing motion of the feet. We've also gone over sumo and maybe monster walks before. I can't really remember. Monster walks, everyone fucks all to hell. So I kind of I feel like monster walks, people actually do make the problem worse. Let's put it that way. And there aren't a lot of really great feet warm-up movements that I implement frequently, other than just reminding people to root their fucking feet into the ground when they're squatting and deadlifting. One that I use for myself is just like a single leg Romanian deadlift, just balanced up and literally, gotta focus, right? But the question becomes, are you even doing that shit well? Because a lot of times what people do is this kind of like weird shit, they're all over the place. And again, they're just kind of like making it worse. And when I say making it worse, you have to look at correctives this way. You're trying to basically correct a bad habit, right? You're trying to teach your body how to move in a certain way. And in order for it to be successful, you have to do it right. What a concept. But you know, it's one of those things where like the band pull aparts, glute bridges, sumo and monster walks, pretty much everything I listed a moment ago are done so poorly that all they're really doing is reinforcing that same movement pattern that's causing the problem in the first place. So often it's, sumo walks done horribly, meaning that people are doing like the penguin and all this weird shit, but they're not actually focusing on where their feet are ending up in relation to their hip, where their knees are ending up in relation to their hips. Notice when I move my knees, my hips move. When I move my feet, my knees and my hips move, thereby once again proving my point. Okay, so since I already went over sumo walks, all of that shit, go back and watch. This is a little bit more of an advanced variation because it combines balance, which is a huge part of what the feet do, right? It's stabilizing the ankle joint, rooting you to the ground, and also like knowing where you are in space, right? Because a reason why if you balance on one foot, it's all going great, maybe. Most people not. If you close your eyes though, it's like suddenly a disaster, is that we over rely on our eyes to tell us where we are in space. And if you don't move like a weirdo, you're not looking down at your feet the entire time that you're walking, right? So you're giving these bad boys a lot of trust. I don't like balance pads. I don't like shit like that to work on balance. I mean, they have their place for like rehabbing, especially like sprained ankles, shit like that. But in your day-to-day life, you don't really encounter a lot of things like that. And they aren't really the reason why people lose their balance. You're not like running across a mattress, right? It's more like, not paying attention to where you're going, encountering like a slippery floor or something. But that doesn't mean that we should all like take up ice skating, right? Because again, that's not really the main thing that's causing the problem. Without further ado, I don't even know what to call this. I don't think I made it up. I don't fucking know anymore at this point. I don't even think anybody knows who made anything up at this point. That's why PTs keep naming shit after themselves, even though they're lying sometimes and they know it. So I'm gonna put this band on just above my knees. And first thing I'm gonna do is have my feet underneath my hips, like directly underneath my hips. I don't want to go too wide. I want to try to get under my, basically like my center of gravity. And so I'm going to start with my left side stabilizing and my right side moving. And I'm going to feel this, or I should feel it mostly in the left side. So first I'm just gonna kind of like hover that right foot up and try not to shift my body weight. So in other words, not do something like this, right? Which, I mean, you saw the result of that, right? But what people do is they'll kind of like sit in the hip while they go through this movement, and that's not the same fucking thing. Got to distribute your weight, right? And then tap and back in line with the arch of the foot. I was watching my work there. Tap back in line with the arch of the foot, and then tap behind without rotating the hip. Tap, and if your balance is particularly bad, needs to be worked on, then you can even just stay at the one phase, right? Like back and forth, because I really want you to pay attention to, and I actually want you to do this in front of a mirror, whether or not you're shifting the hip. Generally, if you take too big of a step, that's what's going on, right? So what I'm thinking about doing is resisting with the side of this knee. And so sometimes what happens, I'm gonna show you from the side too, is people will say, I don't really feel the glute. And the cue that fixes it all is usually some kind of emphasis on the foot. I'll usually see people, the ball of the person's foot kind of lifting up. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I'll cue them to press the ball of the foot heavier into the floor. Sometimes that works. That corkscrewing motion outward that I talked about in that squat and glute bridge video, I don't even fucking remember anymore. But you're pressing down and you're thinking about imagining you're trying to corkscrew the floor. Don't actually move your fucking foot, but like you're trying to corkscrew. You see how that externally rotated me ever so slightly, right? So it didn't look like I was collapsing. Often it won't, but if you're not feeling your glute, there's probably some degree of that going on, or you're shifted over into that hip. It's kind of all the same cue, but it just really depends on whatever works for you, which is the other thing about correct dips. Again, you're trying to teach yourself how to move differently, so that's where cueing becomes so powerful. What cues work? What cues don't work? It's completely dependent on the individual, and you know, sometimes you hear a cue 3,000 times and then one day it's like, oh yeah, that's what she meant. Yeah, it's like that. So the other cue that I give is to think about spinning the inside of the heel inward. And you see it has that same effect, right? So play around with it, and again, just be careful. If you're like, oh, that's so weird, I don't feel it, like, slow down and get a grip. So from the side, right, I want you to see that my body isn't rotating. So out, and see, if I don't take that second to find my center of gravity, I kind of shift right away, because it's just like what you do, right? So I had to correct myself. So take that moment to find your center of gravity, kind of lighten up this foot that's going to be moving. You see my abs are in, I have a soft bend in the standing leg, meaning I'm not doing this, which is another thing, another reason why people lose like pelvic lumbar stability, right? Bracing. So if you're not holding this chain still with your foot because your pelvis isn't in an optimal place, well, it's the same fucking thing. And you see I'm like wobbling as I'm trying to rant at you guys. Balance requires focus. But I'm definitely feeling this in my left side. So hopefully what you saw is that I wasn't rotating a lot. So my right side is where I tend to shift anyway. It's where I tend to be less stable. It's also why every time I demonstrate this exercise, I start with the left. Just because we tend to start where we're more successful, and that's where we tend to drive it home. Because we're fucking cheaters and we know it. We just don't want to admit it to ourselves. So, I'll show you from the right. I mean, I've done this exercise so many times. It gets really tricky when you have to keep teaching yourself new things and find new ways to trick yourself. And also when, even despite your best efforts, you're lazy because it's like, I just want to squat, sumo walks are fast, so I'll just do that first. I do it too. Okay, so I'm going to try to find my, oops, I started doing the same fucking leg, cheater. So I'm going to lighten up. Already it's hard to shift. And so I already know that I'm going to shift more on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and put the ball of my foot on a line on the floor. And that's going to kind of help me like teach my body, right, where I am in space. And so if I'm like, okay, ball of my foot, stay down on that line, stay heavy on that line, then it gives me more of a sense of security, which gives me more of a sense of stability, right? If I were like on a tightrope versus knowing I'm on the floor, right? And it's like that, it's seeking stability, and that's why it feels tight and all this shit, and that's also why it's dumb as fuck to just try to stretch it instead of teaching it how to be stable. So, and it really does not want to lighten up there, okay? So I already know I'm gonna need to make a smaller step on the opposite leg because I already wanna lean excessively when I'm just standing there. So I don't need to do a big range of motion. It's not about trying to win the toe tap band bullshit Olympics. It's about trying to teach this leg to stay stable. And you will feel a burn in the glute, at least that's where you're going for. So another common error is kind of like letting that knee buckle, right? So I'm making a concerted effort not to let my knee go outside the band. So I'm making contact with my big toe for that reason, but I'm not actually setting my foot down. So I'm keeping all my balance right there. And so you can see me from this side, same thing. Abs are in, right? Same idea. Man, I keep wanting to do this on my left side. I favor it, of course I do, because I'm more balanced there. But I'm feeling my right side like crazy. See, cheated again. So just, it's fine, you're not gonna do it perfect. That's not the point of correctives, at least not for me. I want you to just notice when you do dumb shit, because that's how you teach yourself. Like, no, foot, you don't do that. Let's try it again, let's do it right this time. Good foot. I always say too, like I tell this to people who are coming back from injury when they're confronting especially a movement that has caused them pain in the past, is like you kind of have to talk to your body like it's a child. Like, hey man, you're doing great. You're doing great, and you're the best foot ever, and you're trying your best, and we're gonna fucking do this shit, and we're gonna do it well. So, correctives, they're a huge part of what I do. I've done a lot of technique, fix your shitty movements. I'll continue to do those. But at the core of it, most of the fix your shitty movements, in my belief system, have to happen before you touch the weight, right? And I'm a big believer in muscle activation. I'm also a big believer in activating your glutes. It's done wonders for the way that my hips feel. But at the end of the day, nothing worked like trying to use the entire body as a unit, because that's how it works under weight training, right? So planks, dead bug, movements that aren't so isolating. And that's also why sumo walks and monster walks are hard if you do them well, because it's not just like cranking on your hips, right? It's actually getting the alignment correct. It's getting your feet to arrive in the same place. So this is a tricky one, but most people have a lot of success with it. And people who are able to finally get in touch with like that corkscrewing motion that I've mentioned now like 20 times in this video alone, because I want you to learn it, they will feel their glutes every single time. And with that, their piriformis feels better, lower back, knees, right? Because you're stable. Just remember, you've got to learn how to hold your pelvis in the correct position. Make sure you check out on Lux Strength Denver. That's my gym, you guys, in case you don't know. I'm doing a series. I did one episode so far, and then I got so busy I thought I was gonna die. But I'm bringing it back. It's called Strength in Flux. It's a desperate attempt to fit Lux in the name, but you know. But I'm introducing a lot of Pilates principles that I use with every single person I train to make their bodies feel better and to make them strong as fuck. So you can bring those concepts together without you having to buy like a 20 session, reformer package with me. You just pick and choose. You choose things that work for you. Well, you find things that work for you. You develop a toolkit, and then you can choose based on whatever your body is presenting, right? But look even how I'm standing, right? Like this, kickstanding into that fucking hip, you bitch. But I'm just noticing it because there I go again. I've been standing like that forever. I'm gonna stand like that, but I don't wanna do all these like perfect glute bridges and then be like, right? The whole point is that I'm trying to get my body in like the right alignment, make it stick, teach it, and then it will feel better over time. Try it out. This is Fix Your Shitty Movement. My name is Karis.